Hello and welcome to You and the Law. I'm Mike Monta, your producer and host for today's program. And the topic for tonight is going to be firearms rights. Joining me as a guest on tonight's show is a local attorney and expert in this field, Erik Blaine. And on tonight's topic, we will talk about such things as permits, gun trusts, restoration of rights, expungement, relief from disability, Second Amendment, and anything that you, the viewing audience, want to call in on. We are sponsored, as you saw, by the Dayton Bar Association. We'll talk a little bit about them in a while. Before we get to our discussion, let me remind you that You and the Law is a monthly presentation produced here at the studios of the Dayton Access Television. DATV is on Channel 5. It's the public access channel of Time Warner Cable Network in Dayton. The program is also cablecast on it's a video delay. We used to call it tape delay through the auspices of the Miami Valley Cable Council. We also stream live at datv.org. This is an audience participation program. We are coming to you live tonight. The number that you will see on the screen occasionally is 223-5311 if you do have a question. So let me turn to our guest tonight, Mr. Erik Blaine, and have him introduce himself a little more fully and tell you, the viewing audience, about his background and familiarity with today's topic. Good evening, Erik. How are you?
Good evening, Mike. I'm doing well. Thank you very much for having me on the show tonight, and thank you to the Dayton Bar Association and DATV for this wonderful program that we have. To answer your question, my name is Erik Blaine. I'm an attorney at the law firm of Wright & Schulte. We have a primary office in Vandalia. We have a Dayton office, Cleveland, and Cincinnati as well. I'm a 2006 graduate of the University of Dayton School of Law and a 2003 graduate of the University of Dayton itself. I've been calling the Dayton area home for well over a decade now, so being here and being able to present today and talk to you and the audience about firearms and firearms rights is definitely an honor and privilege, so thank you. Prior to moving back here to Dayton and being with the law firm Wright & Schulte, I was a county prosecutor for Shelby County. There I prosecuted crimes, both adult felonies and juvenile felony and misdemeanors. Was involved in the prosecution of firearms crimes and violent acts, as well as property violations. Now, my interest in firearms and the rights of gun owners really started as a personal interest. I grew up in the Cleveland area, and in Cub Scouts when I was young, I learned how to shoot a .22 rifle and a 12-gauge shotgun.
Yeah, it was almost required in Cub Scouts back then, wasn't it?
You know, it was, and I think my shoulder still feels that first bruise from the 12-gauge.
Uh-huh.
But that was my first experience with firearms. From there, and from graduation of law school, firearms shooting became a hobby, a sport. Hunting became an interest of mine, especially in Shelby County. I was able to further a lot of those interests with some like-minded individuals and join some great organizations that allow me to shoot trap with shotguns every Tuesday during the year, as well as become familiar with the firearms through my interactions with the law enforcement personnel, the trainers, becoming trained to carry a firearm not only as a concealed carry holder, but also as a prosecutor going through training with the Ohio Peace Officer Training Academy instructors. So, at Wright & Schulte, my law firm practice really revolves around firearm law and making sure individuals have the rights to keep, possess, and bear arms, but also know how to do so legally, not only from a general firearms and a perspective, but also from a National Firearms Act perspective. We represent corporations, ranges, manufacturers, and firearms dealers as well. So it's really been a joy for me to take one of my hobbies and make it and turn it into a profession. It's what I did with the law when I first started practicing law. Now I'm able to do it for something that I really, really do love.
That's great. Thank you. And thank you for joining us tonight. Why don't we start by talking a little bit about, everybody knows about the right, well, they think they know about the right to bear arms, Second Amendment, and how is that couched in the law? It started when the country started, but I don't think everybody knows what the actual constitutionality of that is. So why don't you fill us in a little?
Mike, it's a great question. In fact, most everybody knows that the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution provides the right to bear arms. Now, the Second Amendment reads that a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. This amendment was so important, so overarching, that the founders believed it should be the second out of 10 changes made at the time the Constitution was created. The ability for people to defend themselves, defend their property, defend and provide for a family food, for the preservation, protection of themselves, for the and to enjoy the sports was something they believed so important that they didn't waste any time when they considered it. Now, while the United States Constitution protects and provides for this right, many state constitutions also do that. Ohio is one of those states.
Why is it necessary to have it in two constitutions then?
Well, we have a federal system of government. We have a republic. And we are truly a collection of states. The federal Constitution provides restrictions and requirements that the United States government must abide by, while the state constitutions are organized and provide those restrictions and those regulations, those building blocks and those principles that the states have to themselves rely on. The right to keep and bear arms is something that the founders saw firsthand as their way to protect against tyranny. It was not something they took lightly. The ability to provide for food on their table was not something they took lightly. And the founders of the state of Ohio mirrored that belief and those rights when we were just a fledgling state. And while those initial ideals were there, they haven't changed in the 200 plus years that we've been around.
There's always a discussion about whether the Second Amendment grants an absolute right to bear arms or whether there are restrictions or enlargements through federal or state law. How does that apply, and why do we need laws if your right to bear arms is present in the Constitution?
Yeah, Mike, the right to bear arms and the ability to legally possess them do have requirements to them. It's like driving a vehicle. You have an ability to drive, but at the end of the day, how you drive and how you legally use firearms is what the federal laws, the United States Code, and the Ohio Revised Code really provide for. They provide for the guidance and the restrictions, where the constitutions of both the United States and Ohio ensure that government can go so far, but they are stopped from going further and trampling upon the individual rights of the people.
Okay, let me stop just for a second. You're watching You and the Law. We're at 223-5311. We're talking about firearms rights today with Erik Blaine. If we could leave that number up a little bit longer, maybe some of the viewers that may have a question about gun rights, firearms rights could call in. How are the laws federally and state enforced? What agencies do we have, and what restrictions are there on your rights to bear arms?
The agencies that are in charge primarily of investigating and enforcing firearms laws and offenses on the federal level are the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives, more commonly known as the ATF. But we also have the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, who will investigate crimes that are committed. Depending on who the crime is committed against, we may have the Secret Service involved, the United States Marshal Service as well in their protection duties. Locally, states, agencies from the county sheriff's departments to local city police departments enforce the laws of the states now, and laws of the county that they're in. Now, on the federal level, we have the protections of the Second Amendment, but we also have restrictions, and we have very important restrictions. Some of our first restrictions started in 1934 with the National Firearms Act. The National Firearms Act itself classified certain firearms as of particular interest to government, that a national registry needed to be made of those firearms.
Okay. Let me interrupt you just for a second. I understand from our floor director we have a call coming in, so if we could take that call at this time. Good evening, you're on You and the Law. All we have to do is get it piped in.
I think we might have lost him.
Okay. Are we pretty close? All right. Well, if you've called, call back. 223-5311. Gun rights have been it's been a volatile subject in the past few years. I think starting back with a number of sensational events, Columbine, the shooting in Connecticut, I believe it was Connecticut, where there's a call for more restrictions on gun rights through various legislatures. How can these be balanced out with the Second Amendment and our constitutions?
Mike, that's a question I've received a lot from people as well as clients. And every loss of life, every killing, every well-publicized shooting, and it is a tragedy. Now, we have laws to protect against and try to prevent those tragedies from happening. And the individuals, the criminals that perpetrate those crimes should be brought, and usually are brought, and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. The ability to own and legally possess firearms is not the ability to own and legally possess firearms for whatever purpose you want to have them and use them for.
Okay, let me break in. I hear we may have been reconnected here. Do we have a call?
Yes, hello.
Yes, we can hear you. Welcome to You and the Law.
Okay, I've got a question.
All right.
My uncle died recently, and he left some guns for us. And I'm in charge of making the distribution in our family. And I'm wondering, what do I need to do to sell these guns, or do I just keep them in the family? And what does the state need me to do as far as documents?
Okay, that's an excellent question. And have you started a probate on this or not? Let me just ask that. Have you opened an estate?
Nope.
Not yet. Okay. All right.
No, my uncle didn't have an estate.
Okay. Well, we're going to attempt to.
But he didn't have an estate.
I'm sorry.
He had a will, but he didn't have an estate.
Okay. Well, we'll try to apply our answer to what you've asked. Go ahead, Eric.
Carl, I appreciate calling in, and that's a question that doesn't have an easy answer. The firearms that your uncle had and you have currently may be of the sort that they're pistols, or they might be rifles, they might be shotguns, but they may also be what are regulated, the firearms that are regulated by the National Firearms Act, that are machine guns, suppressors, rifles that have a short barrel length, there's shotguns that have a short barrel length. So trying to determine exactly what type of firearm we're dealing with is going to be the first step. So contacting a local attorney that's knowledgeable in firearms, and a local firearms dealer or license holder is going to be one of the very first steps in determining what your rights are, what prohibitions you'll be under, to make sure that you don't violate any state or federal laws. So I say that because you can look at a rifle, and one rifle might look the same as the other, but the barrel length is going to determine that that rifle is a short barrel rifle, which has several National Firearms Act and federal penalties associated with the transfer if it's not done legally. Now, Mike asked if the probate estate had been opened. When your uncle passed, I hope you said he had a will. So determining what was in that will and whether there are any other documents out there that can control is going to be one of the other steps that your attorney is going to want to make sure that they talk to you about and they determine. What I have clients do typically is make sure that they understand that there are restrictions, that they can't just hand a firearm to anybody they want to, but we want to make sure we do everything legally, not only with the probate court, but also with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms.
Is it important to determine whether these have serial numbers and have been registered prior to his death?
You know, in fact, Mike, that's going to be a difficult question to answer right off, because Ohio does not have any kind of permitting system for the basic ability to own a firearm. However, there are federally, we will also have a prohibition against a firearms registry that's created to make sure that those registries aren't out there. So you don't have to register every gun you purchase. Now, every gun you purchase must go through a background check when you buy it from a licensed dealer. But the serial numbers that you'll find registered that must be registered are those National Firearms Act, what we call Title II or NFA guns, that have certain characteristics that subject them to the National Firearms Act of 1934 and the Gun Control Act of 1968.
Well, I'm thinking what the caller might wonder is whether you need a background check just to pass them from one family member to another through a probate inventory.
Yeah, and that's going to depend on the answer to the previous question. Is that firearm governed by the National Firearms Act? If the answer is yes, then an application process must be gone through with the ATF. If the answer is no, that the firearm is not one of those Title II registered firearms, then the passage and the distribution from one family member to another family member according to a will or a trust is not subject to a background check, unless, as long as those family members are within the state. If you want to take a firearm from Ohio and transfer it to a relative in Colorado, for example, the Gun Control Act of 1968 requires that you go through a federally licensed dealer to make that transfer. It's illegal to transfer it from resident of one state to a resident of another state without that passage and that check. So overarchingly, I highly recommend talking to a knowledgeable attorney as well as a firearms license holder, typically gun dealers, gun stores, that can help you with these questions and can verify the items in particular when they're looking at this. And I say this because especially recently I have clients where the ATF is looking at the gun. They're not sure just by looking at it whether or not that firearm violates the Title II and is an NFA gun. So they have to actually send it off to the ATF research and development area to determine if it is. So even trained experts cannot always look at it in a split second and know whether or not you're subject to additional restrictions.
So this seemingly simple question doesn't have an easy answer then, does it?
Very few of them do, unfortunately.
Okay. would you suggest that before they start doing it, that they take an inventory of all the types of weapons that they have?
I would. I wouldn't suggest an inventory. I would suggest securing those items from anybody else and protecting them there. And ultimately, we recently heard there's an individual who had passed locally who found in their loved one's estate live World War II ordnance, a live unexploded, I think it was a mortar. So when you see things like that, calling law enforcement, calling the bomb disposal units are some of the very first things you want to do to protect yourself.
So what sort of trouble, and this is just following up, but what sort of trouble could a person or an estate get into by just ignoring everything you just said and just handing them out to whoever wants them?
The penalties range. Federally, the penalties start at 5 years in prison and have 10-year penalties as well, $100,000 to $250,000 penalties depending on how the firearms are transferred or utilized. So on a state level, we have other issues that we're slightly lesser penalties, but these penalties are not, if you transfer all the firearms, you're going to face 10 years. It's a 10 years for every firearm transferred like that.
Okay. Caller, are you still there?
Yep.
Does that answer your question, or do you have a follow-up on it?
Yes, that answered my question. Thank you. So does it matter between Ohio and Kentucky?
The transfers of firearms really do make a difference in the type of firearm they are. So without knowing exactly what types of firearms and whether or not they're subject to Title II of the National Firearms Act,
there could be variances in the states.
Huge question there.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
All right.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for your call. Okay, reminding our viewers, we're about halfway through the program, getting to the halfway point. You're watching You and the Law, as you can see right behind us. And we're talking about firearm and gun rights tonight with Erik Blaine, who is a local expert and an attorney in our area. Our number is 223-5311, and I'm telling you that because it's a call-in show. It's live, and we're live and in color coming to you. So if you do have a question about firearm gun rights, please call in. Before that call, we were talking about the volatility of the subject, and of course, guns creating havoc. And there is a growing number of the population, I think, just from reading Time magazine and Newsweek and CNN and others, that maybe there wouldn't be so many gun incidents if there weren't so many guns. So not asking you to advocate one way or the other, but what is the thought on that?
Mike, killing somebody is a crime, no matter how it's done. And it's a tragedy. The use of firearms to do so has gained a lot of prominence in the media. And we've heard a lot more about that, about those mass shootings. But we've also heard and we've also seen legal gun ownership being utilized to protect oneself from a criminal act, from the home invasion, from the mass shootings themselves as well. We're seeing people that the vast majority of gun owners abide by all the laws. They want to follow every single law, not get in trouble, and know what their rights are. But the calls for further crimes really ignore some of the facts that we need to look at the crimes we currently have on the books that penalize these violations severely. The enforcement of the crimes is real, and the enforcement violations is really where we need to turn resources and to determine whether or not are these violations being prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Are they being prosecuted uniformly? Or are we prosecuting those crimes that will get the most attention.
Okay. We're going to take a very short break here to let you know, again, you're watching You and the Law. We're talking about firearms rights. And we are sponsored by the Dayton Bar Association. And I told the executive director, Bill Wheeler, who's been here a number of years, that I'd tell you a little bit about the Bar Association and some of the services that we provide. We've been around for since 1883, I think. They call this more than 130 years. I think that's right, isn't it? Probably 131 years.
It's a phenomenal organization.
Yes. Community services benefiting our citizens and our attorneys. Some of the things are, if you don't have an attorney, there's a lawyer referral service whose number is 222-6102. If you don't have somebody who can tell you as a lawyer in the field you have a problem in, call them, and for a nominal fee, which I believe is, Bill says it's $35, you can find out all about that and maybe get representation. There's also a website, www.daytonfindalawyer.org, and that's a new thing, and try that. You might be able to find one there. Our association website is www.daybar.org. There's a notary public service if you want to become a notary, notarize your neighbor's car titles or whatever. 222-7902. They'll help you out with that, and there are speakers bureaus with the same number if you need a speaker for your group. We have some excellent volunteer members. Won't cost you anything. You might have to feed them or something. I don't know if you have a dinner meeting. And on a variety of legal topics. So try that out. And one of the great things we've got is a Wills for Hero program where attorneys volunteer to create wills and estate documents at no charge for emergency first responders, fire, police, and EMTs. So the Dayton Bar Association number is 222-7902, and its link is daybar.org. Just take a look. They have a lot of services, and they can help you out, at least start on, guide you in the right direction. We're back at the second half of our program, and we are at You and the Law, and we're talking about firearms rights, and we've gotten into some interesting questions with our expert, Erik Blaine. If you have a question, something like you'd like to know about firearms rights, 223-5311, and we display that number, and I keep saying it, and in case you don't see it on TV, you can hear it. One of the things that we did want to talk about was carrying weapons. And I think that's a topic that a lot of our audience want to know. First of all, do you have to have permits to carry them? Can you carry them into the stores and whatever? Wait a minute. Hold that thought. I have a call. On line 1, they said. So, are you there, caller? Well, they're being connected. All right, we'll just relax here for a second.
Hello?
Hello, welcome to You and the Law.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. I'm a huge fan of the show.
Well, that's great. We always like fans, and we hope you're learning a lot from our experts.
I am, and I have a question on a slightly different topic.
Okay.
My understanding from the, I guess not the most recent shooting, but one of the more recent shootings, the Sandy Hook shooting, was that the shooter actually had legally...
Still there? Are you still there, caller? Well, let me see if I maybe can anticipate what and maybe you can too, the legally owned firearms that they were using, and maybe could there have been more restrictions due to the fact that this person apparently was mentally unstable?
You know, I think Sandy Hook, and this might need more determination of the facts, but I believe in Sandy Hook, the firearms that were used there were legally owned by another person.
Right, the person's
shooter.
mother, right.
Yeah.
But they were legally owned.
They were legally owned, but
okay.
The legal ownership of one person's firearms does not mean that anybody can utilize those firearms for whatever purposes they want. So my legal ownership of firearms, Mike, your legal ownership, anybody else's, doesn't mean that somebody can come into our house, can take the firearms, and can commit these heinous acts with them. And I believe in the Sandy Hook case in particular as well, that the individual who committed those atrocities actually killed the owner,
right.
his family members,
right.
The legal owners of the firearms.
Suppose though that suppose somebody owns a gun then and says, you can borrow my gun or something like that. If you feel you need protection or you just want to go out in the range and shoot around or something like that, and maybe you can always use it if you want to. What are the problems with that would occur for the person that owns them and the person that uses them?
Well, from the very start there, even if somebody doesn't use that item criminally, the borrower, let's call them,
right.
doesn't use that item criminally, if the person who's lending the firearm to them isn't 100% certain that that borrower is not a prohibited person, that lender should not lend their firearm to the person. This is the same thing we're looking at when we trust our car to somebody. I'm trusting my vehicle to you. I'm trusting you to drive my vehicle. But I have to know with certainty that you are a licensed driver. Otherwise, we have issues of, from auto perspective, of a negligent entrustment if you do something with it. But from a firearms perspective, we also have a crime that's occurred. If somebody is a convicted felon who's under a disability, now that's, when I say disability, I don't mean a disability, physical impairment.
Right.
I mean,
tell us what a disability is.
What I mean by that is a legal disability, that their individual right to own and bear arms has been taken from them by the government because of some act or one of the prohibiting qualifications that the federal law provides for. So if I give a felon a firearm, that felon is now in possession of a firearm. And as a prosecutor, this was some of the easiest math to do. Felon plus gun equals conviction.
Okay,
because
so
it is a crime.
If you are a felon, you can't have a firearm, is that right?
Generally speaking, well, if you're incarcerated, absolutely not.
Right.
But
okay.
After you've been released as a felon, if you committed a felony, generally speaking, the answer is going to be no, you cannot possess a firearm. However, there are rights and are ways to restore your rights to possess and own firearms, just like you restored the ability for you to vote in tomorrow's election. And some of those routes are both state and federal. Okay. We have in Ohio a Department of Rehabilitation and Correction, the DRC. Now, the Department of Rehabilitation and Correction has as its second word rehabilitation, with the belief that people can rehabilitate their lives and can change.
Hold that thought.
Yeah.
My floor director tells me we have 2 calls now, so let's take them in order. Are you, can you hear us, caller?
I can hear you.
Okay. Welcome to You in the Law. What is your question for Mr. Blaine?
Hi, I have a question. I live in a not great area, and there's a lot of crime. I've always been concerned about home invasions, and if someone breaks into my house, is it legal for me to shoot them?
Okay, a good question, and I think we know the answer to that here in Ohio anyway. Are you calling from Ohio?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Carl, that is a great question. That's something that I've had a lot of clients come in and ask. The answer is not as clear as it would seem, but in 2008, Ohio passed what's known as the Castle Doctrine. Now, the Castle Doctrine states that if you're in your home, you don't have a duty to retreat before using deadly force. But ultimately, even though you don't have a duty to retreat, if someone breaks into a home, you do have to be in fear for your life. There has to be a danger and to you, to your loved ones. So in determining all this, we're going to have to trust the jury system. But the legislature has provided for that Castle Doctrine to take effect and for a presumption that the shoot to defend yourself in your own home or in your own vehicle was legal. And it's something the prosecution would have to rebut if they wanted to take you to trial and further a conviction attempt and to convince a jury.
So you've got to have some fear. It can't be like the old TV shows where the neighbor comes over to have a cup of coffee or something. And
Absolutely not.
Okay.
It is something that the intruder, the person who is shot, must be there illegally. They can't be a spouse who has come over or somebody you've legally invited into your home. That is a crime.
Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I was wondering then, so let's say they're not allowed to come in, I did not invite them, will I then, that's considered self-defense, but would I also then be arrested as part of it?
Yes. The short answer is yes. When you
Well, there's going to be an investigation. You might not be arrested.
When police arrive on the scene, they're taught that they need to be in control. They need to know who has the firearm. And immediately thereafter, you'll be detained. You'll be, your gun will be taken. They have a duty under the law to protect your firearm and return it back to you at the conclusion of these events if you're not convicted. But at the time that this is all happening, while they're trying to sort it out, you will be detained, and you may be detained in handcuffs.
Until they determine what's going on, right?
Exactly. To determine that this was your house and that no charges are being brought.
Okay. Does that answer that question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, you're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Thank you for calling. Do we have another call, Madam Floor Director? Okay, let's see if we can get that call in. Good evening, you're on You and the Law.
Hi.
Yes, what is your question?
My question is, if somebody has a gun legally, but you have a reason to think that they are mentally unstable, is there any way to extract them of their gun? Like if you're worried that they might do something dangerous?
Do you mean like physically take it away from them or legally take it away from them somehow?
Well, legally, and also are you as an individual allowed to get it away from them?
That's an interesting question.
There's a couple parts to that question, Carl. I appreciate it. So if you, when we're talking about the ability to own and possess these firearms, or any firearm in general, if they're not a prohibited person, they're not a felon, someone with a conviction that prohibits them from owning it, they've not been involuntarily committed, then they do have a legal right to possess the firearm. Now, if somebody has been threatening you and there is true cause for concern, what I would recommend is, of course, contacting law enforcement if a threat's been made to determine exactly what rights and what abilities law enforcement might have. The civil justice system does provide for the ability to protect yourselves, yourself and your loved ones. So the ability for you to go take a firearm from somebody else, as a second part of this question, really looks...
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
The ability for you to take a firearm from somebody else really looks at a possession right. Do you have the legal ability to take the property of somebody else's? So I don't have the legal ability to go take Mike's car or his house without his permission. And so I would caution that taking somebody else's property is something that can put yourself in more jeopardy than is recommended.
However, if the person is a friend or a family member or somebody, for safety's sake, would it be advisable to remove that gun if you are concerned that they may, harm themselves or others? And then if so, would you just transport it straight to a police station, or are you just suggesting do not get involved?
Let me ask you a question before Eric answers. Are you talking about a situation of immediate danger or just a potential danger of harm to the person and to others?
I'd say potential, not an immediate situation. Just something where you think the person might be unstable.
Okay.
Mike's question was actually very appropriate there. If there's a potential for harm, your legal ability to do something and the legal ability of police to do something is severely limited. The individual that we're discussing here does have a Second Amendment right. They do have the right to keep these arms and possess them. And absent credible evidence or evidence of an immediate threat, then the ability for law enforcement, the courts, or even anybody else to get involved is minimal and is, I would highly advise against.
But they should probably, and I think, caller, tell me if I'm wrong, you just don't want to run off to the police and maybe make more of it than is necessary. You're trying for a more peaceful resolution, possibly.
Right.
Yeah. Seeking and recommending professional help for an individual might be a more advantageous route to take instead of confronting. And people have a very visceral, very gut reaction when it comes to firearms. And confronting somebody immediately that I've taken your firearm or that you need to give me your firearm may not be advisable. It may not have the reaction that anybody wants.
Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our floor director.
That's a very good question.
Yeah, floor director says we have another call on line 1. Are you there, caller? Sometimes we have a hard time getting our string and tin cans.
Hello?
Hello, you're on You and the Law.
Yes, hi, how are you?
Fine, how are you tonight? What's your question?
Well, I was wondering about open carry. I understand, in Ohio, with a concealed carry, you have to get a permit and have certain qualifications, and there's, restrictions on where you can and cannot carry it. I was wondering about open carry in Ohio, if there were any licensure that I would need to carry a loaded weapon that is not concealed, or on a type of weapon, or if there's any restriction on place that I could carry it.
Very good questions. Let me start off with the concealed carry aspect of it. To concealed carry, you're absolutely right. You do have to go through a permitting process with your local law enforcement and the sheriff of the county before you can conceal carry a handgun. Now, one of the misconceptions about concealed carry is I can conceal carry a gun. In fact, in Ohio, you're only allowed to conceal carry a handgun, not a rifle or a suppressor or anything of those
Or a sawed-off
names.
shotgun.
Or a sawed-off shotgun. You're not legally allowed to do so. Now, the answer about open carry is you do have a right to open carry in Ohio. There's no prohibition against it. Your right to open carry a firearm is something that is very closely guarded and is something that I do stress the utmost caution for to make sure that you're not accidentally concealing the firearm, because we look at a scenario where you are traveling to a location. If you're traveling to a location and have a loaded firearm in a vehicle, you're carrying a concealed firearm, which if you don't have a permit is illegal. However, once you get to that vehicle, or once you get to that destination, having an open firearm is permissible for you to do. The type of firearms you may open carry in Ohio are rifles, shotguns, handguns. So if you're going to do it, I advise doing so with caution and ensuring that you're doing so in a very safe manner, because people out there, people are not used to seeing open carry of firearms, and law enforcement is often called when someone is open carrying a firearm. And so interacting with law enforcement is going to be your next hurdle to accomplish, and that interaction is going to be crucial as we deal with any kind of legalities moving further. So I think, does that answer the couple of different parts there?
Yes. Now, is it permissible in open carry to have the weapon loaded?
In Ohio, it is.
Yes. Okay.
All right. Thank you for your call.
Thank you.
I have a question. I think if somebody was walking into Macy's with a rifle or something like that loaded, they might induce some panic. Might be considered disorderly. What's the deal on that, do you think?
10 years ago, the answer to that question would have been very straightforward. But people have learned about their rights and have understood and are starting to understand that open carry in Ohio is something that's permissible. There are groups that do propose or do sponsor it and are proponents of it. But if you are open carrying in some place like Macy's or someplace else,
McDonald's,
Kroger,
Walmart,
the ability to open carry there is permissible, but you may have to deal with law enforcement being called. I've heard I've had several law enforcement friends who have told me about the stories that they're called to a grocery store. One was a law enforcement officer himself who had the police called on him. And the dispatcher was asking the individual, is he pointing the gun at anybody? No, he's buying rice. That is something that law enforcement is becoming more knowledgeable and more aware of. So it is something we're seeing. So we are seeing a decrease in some of those calls. But at the end of the day, it is a peril that if you do open carry, you may have people that call the police on you. Additionally, if you open carry and you pull that gun out and you point it in somebody's direction or at somebody, that's called brandishing a firearm. And without having self-defense, without being in jeopardy of life or limb yourself, that is a crime.
Okay, so if you're going to do it, you better be aiming at the ground or something, or what?
You know, if you're going to do it, keep the gun in the holster.
Okay, all right. We have about 8 minutes left in the show, and I know we wanted to talk about some things like restoration of rights and relief from disability and pardons. And I know this should be a 2-hour show, but
I think we might have to do a second segment on this.
So what can you tell us about that for folks that may need or want their rights restored?
You know, people lose their rights through convictions of a crime. Ohio provides for several different ways for those rights to be restored, because as we were talking about a little while ago,
they can be, though.
They can be restored to full right of firearm ownership. But to do so, there are 3 different routes we need to look at, and the facts of each individual case are going to dictate which route might be best for that person. We may look at the most direct route, which is a relief from disability under the revised code, which provides for an application to be made by an individual to the common pleas court in that jurisdiction, or that individual's jurisdiction, to review and determine whether or not the person's rights should be restored.
Okay. Would you mind taking another call?
Okay, sure.
One more call. Let's see who it is. Are you there? Caller?
Yes.
Yes. Welcome to You in the Law. What is your question?
A question is, if my husband, who does have a CCW license to carry, leaves a weapon in a car, and I am driving the car, and I do not have the permit, and let's say I get stopped for a traffic light or something that I may have done, or, you know, I didn't yield or whatever, and they find a gun in the car, it doesn't belong to me, I had no knowledge of it, what are the repercussions to me?
You know, I've had this
A
exact.
loaded gun in a vehicle.
I have had this case, and what you're looking at when you drive someone else's vehicle, you are under the law viewed as having control of all contents of that vehicle and responsibility for all contents of that vehicle. So, if you are driving a car and there's a loaded firearm in there, you are technically carrying and transporting a loaded firearm, and that's a felony of the 5th degree in Ohio, if you don't have your own CCW license.
Right.
What I would recommend for people that have this kind of situation is that if one party is going to have a CCW license, the other party should also have that. Spouses especially there. It's something that we borrow each other's cars. My wife drives my car, I'll drive her car. So we want to make sure that if there is a firearm in there, both are protected at the end of the day.
Okay, well, that does answer the question. So I would be liable for that firearm being there. I could be actually prosecuted.
You could be.
I could be. Okay. Well, that does make me think about getting my CCW license. Thank you.
Thank you
Yeah,
for
actually, if I could on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you, Mike. But looking at getting a CCW license represents several different individuals who have their CCWs, as well as instructors and teaching organizations. What I tell people and what I look at with the training of a CCW under Ohio law, you're required to go through 12 hours of training. Mm-hmm. 3 of those hours have to be on the law. You also have to have several hours of live fire training. So if you're having a firearm in the house, and especially if you're having somebody else with a CCW license, that the gun might be loaded in your vehicle, not only from a liability perspective, but also from just knowing what to do with the firearm is going to be crucial. So that training can have a double benefit of not only letting you know what to do, but also protecting you legally from prosecution.
Okay, great. Caller still there?
Yes, I am, and thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you for calling. All right, I think we got 3 minutes left now,
3 minutes, all right.
which you probably have 2 of them here. Restoration of rights, I forget the exact point you were making, but...
With the restoration of rights, people can restore their rights to firearms ownership. They can provide for a direct route of restoration. They can get felonies, a felony and a misdemeanor, or 2 misdemeanors even expunged if the restoration or relief from disability directly is not the right route to go. And still we can go through the pardon system. I declined to appear in front of the parole board and the pardon board for clemency just last week, actually. 30 years ago in 1984, he had made some stupid mistakes as an 18, 19-year-old kid involving theft and some other nonviolent offenses. And currently we're furthering his efforts to be able to get a job, to be able to move forward through the pardon system by wiping out these 30-year-old offenses. Since he has lived a great life, he's provided for his family, and has actually attained a position in his company that normally is reserved only for people that have high degrees, and he's done a phenomenal job. And he's truly proof that the pardon system can work, hopefully, and that people can change and can learn from their mistakes.
So it's not like a lifetime thing. There are avenues that...
It doesn't have to be.
Okay. Our floor director tells us we have 2 minutes. I'm going to give you about a minute of it here.
All right.
If you want to take it. Guns it's a hot topic. Mm-hmm. Guns good or guns bad? Should we take them all away and then there wouldn't be any problems, or are they so useful that we need them for not only protection but recreation and other things?
Without taking a position, right?
Yes, without taking a position,
Mike,
if possible, or take one. I don't care.
Guns are no more good or bad than this pen, the iPad, these cameras are. People make choices with guns. People make choices with the pen. People further and commit acts with these items. By themselves, they're not good, they're not evil. But we need to make sure that we're respecting everybody's individual rights. The government can no more trample on my right to free speech, my right to worship as I please, than it can the Second Amendment. And my ability to tell you or to record what religion you practice or what any of our viewers practice is so fundamental that we look at it and we want to make sure that it is preserved, that we don't pick and choose which amendments we're going to protect, which amendments we agree with from the buffet line. We have the Constitution, we have all the amendments, and ensuring that especially the first 10 are observed, are protected, and are treasured as they have been for years is something that falls on each one of us to make sure that we do every time we go to vote, every time we step out the door.
Great. We're out of show. Thank you, Erik, Blaine. This has been a production of You and the Law. Thank you for joining us. I want to thank all the volunteers behind the scene who've made the program possible. And thank you, Erik, Blaine, for an interesting and intelligent approach to gun rights. I've been your producer and host. I'm Mike Monta. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you again on You and the Law. Good night.